Hey everyone, it's Rob Stanley with the FeedbackWhiz podcast. And today I've got two special guests that I actually wanted to get on the show. I was going to get them on separate, but they wanted to both come on together, which I'm more than happy to have. I got Fernando Cruz and Nick Young. They're both co-founders of MarketplaceOps and Pixelfy Me. Thanks for being on, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely honored to have you guys on because you guys have done a lot. And one of the things we're going to talk about today on just how well they've done is some lessons that they've learned from selling over $80 million on Amazon and Walmart. That's a pretty incredible feat there, guys.
Thanks, man. Making me blush.
No. I mean, obviously, when you're doing that kind of money, you've gone through a lot. You've gone through the ups, the downs, and we want to give out as much information as we can to Amazon sellers and help them out. So why don't we just kind of jump right into it? And let's start with, can you tell me more about your launch process? That seems to be a big question that a lot of sellers come up with.
Launch process. This is something it's a landscape that's constantly changing. And I think right now, really the launch process comes down to, of course, you always have to make sure you have a great product. I think we've kind of gone past the age of having a Me Too product. I think, the launch really starts all the way at the beginning of when you're developing a product. Number one, understanding your market, and understanding how you're going to differentiate your offering. And I think having a differentiated offering is, one of the most key significant factors of having a successful product launch. Because if your product is the same and there are already incumbents there with a lot of reviews, it's going to be really difficult to overtake them. And so the main thing is just making sure that your offering is well differentiated, it's well priced. And then, once that is put in practice and you have that product getting ready, making sure that you have all your images obviously ready to go. One thing we really like to do is we like to A/B test our main image against the competition. And so we'll use a tool like PickFu, and that's super important. And oftentimes what we might even do is, we might take a competitor's products, the ones that are performing the best, we'll put them through PickFu just so we understand actually, like, what is it that leads people to actually click this product over another? Why would they prefer to click this one? And we'll take that information, that feedback, and incorporate it in our actual branding and the way that we design the packaging. And so I think that, again, really sets you up to really win from the very beginning. And then from there, once the product arrives and we have all our images detailed, we found an image that really statistically works for us in terms of, running these polls. Then we'll go ahead and, start off with an aggressive coupon. I think that's something that's pretty underutilized, especially now that Amazon is so sensitive around price changes. We use coupons to actually modulate the pricing. So we'll start off with an aggressive coupon. Obviously, your price should be better than what's available if you have less reviews. And then, we'll use typical search, find, buy type things. So whether it's using a ManyChat funnel, whether it's using, rebate key, we like to use a mixture of different traffic sources from social sites and also, from our own audience and our own list to drive those sales, and then keep a consistent sales velocity targeting, anywhere from 3 to 5 keywords at a time. And so, we'll do that in tandem with, keeping high PPC, at least initially in budget, high CPCs, so we can really start getting that traffic. And then, over a period of time, once you start indexing, you can really go hard on targeting those keywords. And, ultimately that's where it goes from there. So if you have a well-differentiated product, well-priced, generally, we find that product will take off, especially if we're feeding it, varied sources of traffic.
Yeah. So a kind of a follow-up question to that. I want you guys to tell us a little bit about what kind of research you guys do to find the product, but also before you touch on that, when you're doing the A/B testing, a lot of times when, let's say you found that kind of perfect product, do you sometimes just get a sample and then turn around, do the images and do A/B testing on it to be able to kind of see before you go to like a full, say, mass production of something?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess for the first part of like finding the product, I mean, we're drawing inspiration from like a bunch of different places. Obviously we're using like a lot of like the Chrome extensions that everybody uses, whether it's like Jungle Scout or Buyer Launches, but I mean, something that we've been integrating a lot more now into like our product development, and then also helping out clients is like using like brand analytics, because it's such a powerful tool. Also, I feel like underutilized in terms of looking at like actual like keyword relative ranking, specifically on Amazon. And so kind of thinking about it from that perspective of like, okay, like it shows your click shares and your conversion shares. and then looking at like, okay, like these guys are dominating this like click share. Like, do we have a better offering than these guys? But yeah, we're absolutely. I think like, kind of what Nick was alluding to earlier is, yeah, we used to be just like so quick about like launching products. We were doing anywhere from like 10 to 15 a month. And we're just doing a ton of Me Too products. It wasn't like super innovative. We're just like, okay, this is good enough. Boom, like we'll launch it. And I think you can still do that to some effect, but like there's a very like short life cycle specifically for those types of products. Now what we're doing is definitely a little bit more like innovative, spending a lot more time doing a lot of that like kind of integrated like marketing with like your product launch and your product development. So it's all like married together into like one cohesive process, instead of just like, hey, I'm gonna order the next like silicone gloves and just like hope for the best. Yeah. And so I would say that's like kind of like where we're doing a lot of our research. But yeah, I think we're just a lot more specific in terms of like product quality. I think, prior to 2016, you could just buy reviews. And so it's just so simple to like prop any product up with reviews. But, we just have noticed like over the years, it's just gotten obviously a lot more competitive. You need to have a lot more cohesive of a strategy, but also just like really high product quality. And like those reviews will just really determine like the life cycle of a product. And so it just, it requires everything to be a lot more integrated than it was like 3 or 5 years ago.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I mean, back 2013, when I saw on Amazon, you could just grab a product, throw it up there. And as long as they had something unique, and it was a little bit different, it would do fine. And you just keep reordering and start adding more products. And that's still, we're not saying that's not the right way to go. Like if it's somebody's brand new, you probably don't want to go out there and start creating a product from scratch and dumping a bunch of money to learn the Amazon process. So what we're kind of talking about here is more like once you've got to that point of like a private label, you start to look at things like creating your own brand of product, creating your own actual items, like from scratch. Like I had Gimba on, and they're a great one to go to with. We had the whole thing with the, scratch it down on a napkin and send it to them type thing, and it's kind of that same scenario. That this is next level stuff. Like you just kind of get to that point once your company's built up, and once you understand the process, that you need to go next level. You need to start actually creating items from scratch. And that's what we're talking about today, is definitely that. And that's where you go next level for sure, right, guys?
Yeah. And to add to that, like, I think, you can even differentiate even before that, right? Before even creating a brand from scratch or a product from scratch. I mean, when we talk about differentiation, it's not just having a unique item, but it's also having an item that might be bundled differently, and I mean, this is pretty commonplace now, but back in the day, people only used to do 1-packs of certain items. And then, a simple thing we do is like a 2-pack or 3-pack, because it's a clearly differentiated offering that offers more value for the price. And so that's just a really simple way that you can differentiate. I think at this point, that's probably pretty well known. But, other ways that you can do it is just bundling an additional item that might be easy for your manufacturer to source. But that additional item, maybe the marginal value, I mean, the cost is only 10 cents in addition, but it adds $2 in additional perceived value. So those are the ways that, we really try to mess with, understanding what is it that our competitors are offering, and what small thing, even if it's small, can we actually make obvious in the main image that, hey, this product actually stands out and is different. And it could be something very simple, and it doesn't have to be something super complicated.
Yeah. And a quick follow-up to earlier when you were talking about coupons and stuff. So one of your strategies to kind of like, let's see if I get the right wording, kind of like take a little bit of a hit to it first for that long-term gain, right? Like you're giving away quite a bit of it up front, but the gain is in the long run, hey, we're going to make that up easily, and then some as that product goes on for a year or maybe even longer, you hope.
Yeah. I mean, I think the payback period really just depends on the product and its margins. I think ultimately, it's hard to have a hard and fast rule because every single category is so different. You might have a case where, a product just takes off because the perceived value is so great for the money that they'd be paying that it just really takes off. And we've had instances like that. But in general, it's going to be the case that if you're selling a similar offering, that if someone has thousands of reviews and you have none, what's the reason that someone's going to click your product over another? And so you have to create as many reasons as possible, for a customer to go to your listing, versus another one's. And so, I'll give you an example. I recently had, a dinner with a couple of friends, And I actually asked them this question, because we were talking about Amazon, and they don't know anything about selling on Amazon. But I said, oh, well, how important is count of reviews for you? And all of them said yes. And I said, okay, well, if you had to choose between a product that had 2,000 reviews or one that had, 100, but the 100 one was cheaper, which one would you go with? And they said the 100. So, the question is really like, how many more reviews and how much social proof do you need to show, and how many incentives do you need to give them before they decide to choose your product? And I think, that's really the perspective that you need to look at. Like, where am I missing? Where am I missing the mark? And, you need to make up for that until you get the sales velocity that you're happy with. Then you can start to normalize your pricing. And that period might be 1 month. It might be 2 months. It might be, I know for supplements, it could be as long as 6 to 8 months. So, it just really, really depends.
Yeah. Then the other thing I want to add in there, I mean, we've talked about this on the show when I had sellers on. It's like, also you got to be aware of the quality of your product. If you put a product up that's not very high quality, it's just, and some people kind of take that sort of, they try to go with the cheaper one because they're trying to beat the next person on price, when the reality is stay with the one that's better quality and maybe a better feature and differentiates itself, and go with the marketing. But you're right there too on, I just think about when I'm looking at Amazon, right? If I feel somebody's got 100 reviews versus 1,000, of course I'm going to look at the one that has 1,000, but maybe the 100 review has a different feature on it, or it's just as good and it saves me money. I'll just grab that one instead. So one of the questions that came up that I was just thinking about was, we were talking about, like, you guys are a whole nother level of seller, right? Like, we've got, definitely you're gone to the next level. So what are some of the things that kind of differentiate you guys from, say, like a small to a medium-sized seller that maybe that they mess up on, or that they could do to kind of go and become that next, really big seller?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think our team really helps. I think that's like a major thing. But I think, something that an early stage seller can do, I think it kind of, starts with like that kind of product development piece. Like, in the beginning, we were really focused on the launch, like, and it was so much like, okay, like, we need to be the best at like launching. But what we've like found, especially as like time has passed, like, Amazon, like as a marketplace has matured, is like, kind of what Nick was alluding to earlier, is just like, it really starts from the product being really differentiated. And so one of the things that we started doing, like for all of our products, or even we do this, like, is basically put it together like a competitor analysis. And so we'll actually just put it like in an Excel, but you basically just look at all of the different top people that you're going to compete with. And then let's say you're doing a supplement, for instance, you can break down like, okay, here's all the ingredients, here's how much they're offering, here's like their price. If you can also do like, let's say a price per ounce or a price per capsule, and you can just add in everything, even like, are they organic, are they vegan, like all the different like criteria. And then you're kind of like basically doing like a side-by-side comparison with your own product. And then basically just figuring out like, okay, like I'm like, these guys have this many reviews, like our product is still like pretty inferior, to be honest. And so I need to figure out a way to do this, and kind of work with your manufacturer. And so like we'll actually do that, just like show them like, here's the table, like here's like what we're like projecting, and we look at them like partners, right? And so we're like, look, we need to hit this kind of price point, like we can maybe like have like a lower ROI specifically on the first order, but like if we get to this like amount, like what can we do in terms of like pricing so that we hit like our target margins. And I think it's that kind of like iterative process. It takes a lot more work than just like, again, like let's say ordering like the next like silicone gloves like we used to, but I think it's a lot better in terms of the long term.
Yeah. So speaking of pricing, I mean, we talk a lot about, the product quality, having a unique product, having, kind of unique things to that product that set you apart. But how much time do you guys spend kind of coming up with pricing? Is that kind of part of that competitor table? Like having in there, you kind of already know, where your price point needs to be. And then you're working with the manufacturer to make sure to get it down or get enough of the product to be able to get it down to that price point? Or is it kind of the opposite? You go to the manufacturer first, kind of find out what the cost is going to be, and then start figuring out the pricing?
I think it's a mix of both. So, I think we'll say, we'll do this competitor table that Fernando is talking about. And then we'll say, okay, well, this is our target margin. This is what we want to work at. And then we'll start talking to manufacturers saying, okay, well, for these things that we want, what price can you give us? And then we'll shop around the price point and we'll say, hey, this is a target that we want to meet. And if they say they can't do that, I think one thing that people don't do enough of is actually breaking down the price with the manufacturer and saying, okay, well, what are the factors that lead to this product being this cheap or this cheap? Because you might get really cheap quotes. And so, you can ask them, hey, like, why might they be cheaper? And they can actually break that down. And if you actually can get a breakdown line out of what's the material cost, what's the labor cost, what's this cost, you might be able to figure out something where you can cut and shave costs down while still maintaining quality. So I would say that, it's important to do your research up front so you know what margins you need to hit before you go shopping around. I also think it's important to also have an understanding of the range of pricing of your item. If you have a really unrealistic range, then doing that upfront work isn't going to be helpful. So let's use a standard Chinese product, for instance. Like, you can just go to Alibaba and get a sense of what the range is going to be. And so immediately that can save you time. If you work backwards and say, well, I need to hit a 30%, margin, this isn't going to really get me there. This product is way too expensive. Then you can just discount that and don't worry about the research. So I would say it's important to have a good sense of the range. And if you feel like you have, after selling so much now, I think we have a good sense of like what something should cost. Yeah. So generally, we'll know that, and then we can say, okay, this is really what we're trying to shoot for. How can you help us meet this and work with the manufacturer to get to that point?
Yeah, Nick, I want to hold on. I want to mention something that you brought up, and I have not heard anybody mention this. You were talking about going back to a manufacturer and getting more of a breakdown of the cost, like. You were talking about like the material costs, I think the manufacturing of it, like the product or the packaging, things like that. Talk about that a little more, because I have not had anybody mention that on the show. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook, that you could kind of go in there and start looking at in more detail and start seeing where can you make a few adjustments on things. Like I'll give a quick example and you can maybe follow up on it. Maybe they're shipping it in a cardboard box that's inch thick that doesn't need to be an inch thick, right? Something like that. Or one of the things I always remember from going to a lot of the factories over in China is we would start talking to them about the raw material, like the plastics to do an injection mold. Were they recycled plastic or was it brand new plastic? That can make a difference on the quality of it, but it also can make difference on the price. Talk about that a little more if there's a little more to that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's much more. I mean, I think at the end of the day, a lot of sellers don't realize that manufacturers also have their own margin, right? And there's a lot of things that lead into that margin. So I think it's really important to put yourself in the shoes of your supplier to understand, like, okay, well, why is it that they're giving me this price? And I think you'll find that oftentimes a lot of these manufacturers are open, and just by having this conversation, they see you as a partner, right? Because you're really trying to understand, okay, what's the cost here? I really want to work with you, but we can't meet at this price, but we want to make something work. Mm-hmm. And so, oftentimes they'll open up to you and say, hey, like, this is actually the breakdown. And if you really just dig in, there might be some things you can cover. You might find, hey, there's really nothing they can shrink without sacrificing the product quality. Mm-hmm. But like you said, there might be certain things that they do that the other manufacturer does not do. And by finding those things, you can uncover some, I guess, arbitrage of opportunity in which you can cut down on cost while also building, I think, a better relationship with the manufacturer in general. Because, if you're able to help them improve their cost, ultimately they're getting more sales, with more people. So, it's just a way to really look at things differently to say, okay, well, the cost that a manufacturer gives you isn't necessarily a final price. And I also think that, I want to caveat this with saying that this also maybe more applies to manufacturers that you've had a longer standing relationship with. Maybe they're more willing to, but I don't think it hurts to have that conversation early on. If, you feel like, hey, this is an opportunity. I found a good supplier. I really want to try to make this work because, we've gone through, I want to say hundreds of suppliers at this point, definitely over 100. And, we know from experience that a great partner makes such a huge difference in how your business is run, and how you just handle everything, especially since the time frame is so much longer for which it takes to put the deposit down and get the product. So I would really prioritize getting a good partner and then trying to figure out how to make it work rather than only going for the cheapest price. And so this really opens up that conversation.
Fernando, I think you were going to add some. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
No. Yeah, no, it's group. Yeah, I think, to your point, Rob, like, some things that we've done, like specifically on that side, is like, yeah, I know when they give us like the breakdown, like I think it's like the big buckets are usually like, yeah, the product costs, like labor and packaging. And we found like for sure, like packaging is one that where we could definitely like work with. A lot of the time, the supplier that we worked with, it wasn't always the biggest company, for instance. And so that we could like kind of aggregate like packaging from somebody else, from like a different partner that we had. And then we could basically drop costs like specifically there. But yeah, I think, and then also, yeah, I realized that maybe it's hard to visualize, but like we have like two different kind of spreadsheets. So we have like the competitor matrix, which is like really helpful. So it's kind of like a more like finalized like step. So that's again like where we're comparing all of our competitors with like the pricing, like price per unit, and just like how we're going to stack up. But then also we have like a product evaluation sheet, and so that's kind of like where we're doing like a kind of a quick analysis of like, okay, here's like where everybody, like most people are selling their product at this price. Here's our like projected COGS. Here's what the referral fees are going to be. Here's what the FBA fees are. And then we have that all kind of side by side. And then basically based on our target margins, then we can kind of like quickly eliminate. And then that way we know which ones we want to like move on to the next step. So it's kind of like a different like phased process of how we like review like a product going through the life cycle.
Yeah. Now, what about like you mentioned some margins? Is there a certain margin you guys work on, and would you be willing to share what that is?
Yeah. So we do it based on like return on investment capital. So we're looking at a different like ROI and a different margin based on if the manufacturer is like, let's say in the US versus China, obviously, because there's that different cash conversion cycle or different like shipping time between the two. But yeah, I would say for like China products, we're usually looking for like 150 to like 175% ROI, or like give or take like 35 contribution margin. So after fulfillment, referral, advertising, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the US, we're okay with it being lower. So I would say probably like 100 to 125% ROI. And then the margin's going to be like, or the contribution margin is going to be a little bit lower. But again, because it'll make up for it just because we can carry less inventory and flip the cash faster.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's some good margins. Now, what about, we get this a lot, this question comes up a lot from people that message me and stuff. Usually there's a lot of sellers that they got that first product, they're kind of doing okay with it, and they're struggling on the second product. Now, we kind of mentioned that, would you suggest, of course, this will vary depending on the product, but would you guys suggest like doing if possible, doing the packaging, like quantity of 2 or bundling it? And then kind of a third part is, should they try to find another product that's within sort of that category that they're already selling in? That way, maybe it's a little easier transition.
Yeah. I would say that again, it depends on your category, right? I think, a long time ago, we made the mistake of selling one product in certain different categories. And honestly, it kind of like after we scaled to 50 products at that point, we realized that it was problematic because we had spent so much time adding more and more different products in different categories that we actually weren't protecting, the products that were doing well. And so, we realized our mistake at that point, and then we really changed our strategy to actually being focused on not only adding more products and expanding our presence on different categories, but also, protecting our existing product with better offerings. And so my suggestion would be, if you have a really home run first product, figure out how you can add more value and take up more space. Let's say it's a nascent space where your offering is still the best offering. I would run the assumption, and it's definitely going to be the case, that someone's seen your product on Jungle Scout, they've seen it in the suggestion box, so they're going to make a copy. So you assume that they're going to make a copy. So my recommendation is, knowing that that's inevitable, make a better, more differentiated offering from your existing offering and take up more space. So ultimately, we look at listings as real estate, right? I mean, the more space that you can take and the more spots you can take for the keywords, the better you'll be positioned to actually get sales across all your products. So, what we did was, when we had a great product, we launched 4 more variations with different multi-pack offerings, different colors as separate listings initially, because it allowed us to take up more space and really own that category. And that strategy actually worked really, really well. We actually call it the monopoly method. And that's something that Anthony, Fernando, and I teach, because it makes it so that you really are thinking ahead of your competition. And at that point, your competition might think, oh, you know what, like, I'm no longer the best offering, there's no point. not only does it demoralize them, to some degree, but it also discourages other people from entering, because they see that, oh, wow, like, this guy's already owning the market. So, that's, I think, my suggestion is that, that is something that I would do if I had a really great listing. Not only that, I think it also adds benefit to working with the manufacturer directly. So that way you don't have as many manufacturers that you're working with. Because, I think most people, they don't think about the issue, which is, as you scale the amount of products that you have, having products in of itself scales more problems, right? You have more listings to worry about. But it also happens on the manufacturer side. The more manufacturers you work with, the more issues you face, the more you have to worry about how to combine your shipments, where your shipments are coming from, how they're stored. And so if you have one manufacturer that you're working with, that really simplifies everything. We actually know a company, and he's since sold, but he was doing like $50 to $70 million a year selling, cases, and he only worked with one supplier the entire time. And so, I mean, that in of itself is such an incredible situation, because, you're going to get better credit terms, you're going to be prioritized as a partner, and that just helps everything. And so it's a symbiotic relationship that I think everyone should aspire to get to, because I mean, that partnership can really help you attack a lot of different avenues, not only Amazon, but also retail, all these other different channels.
Yeah. I'm going to say that can sometimes work against you too, though, working with just one. I had good relations with some factories, and they ended up somebody came in with like bigger orders over us, and they kind of pushed us aside, so I think it also just depends that you got to at least have a backup one. I'm just going to at least say that, right? It's always good to at least have a backup.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So now you guys have touched into the retail space, and what are some of the headaches you kind of felt getting into that whole retail environment? I mean, this could probably go on a whole nother show, but just kind of give us some highlights of.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say for retail, like, it's just a really different business model. It's like, just to boil it down simply, it's the difference, I guess, between B2B and B2C. And so I think we tried to kind of like limp in, I would say, in terms of like retail in the beginning, and it was because we were getting inbound interest, right? A lot of our products were bestsellers, so a lot of buyers from specific retailers were reaching out saying like, "Hey, we want to buy your products," and we're like, "Okay, great. Like, how many do you want?" And they're like, "Oh, 1,000." So we would just send like a removal order from Amazon to them, and it just did not go well. I mean, and obviously, like, if you've ever received like removal orders, you know how like terrible they come packaged, and it's just like, it's a nightmare. And so I think it took us a while to really set up like the right infrastructure that you needed to like set up. Like Amazon, like despite all the crap that they get, like their system for like shipping in product is super easy, right? You just have to like put the right labels and then the right like carton sizes, the right weights, and like that's pretty much it. Everything else is for the most part taken care of. But yeah, with retailers specifically, there's just a lot more requirements to labels. There's just a lot more like operational like headache to set it up. There's like actual like invoicing that you have to set up. They're not going to take most are not going to take removal orders. Like you need to actually set up like a 3PL. And so I think like probably the first step for like especially for a lot of sellers just kind of starting out is making sure that they have like a 3PL set up that they can like drip products into Amazon, especially during like Q4 or if they have larger products. If you have tiny products, it doesn't really matter. But like having that like system like really set up where you're able to like optimize the different storage rates. And then if you're able to handle that like really well, then I think it's a good time to like really kind of venture into retail if you're getting that inbound interest. But yeah, I would say like some of the other like challenges was just getting the attention of the buyers. Like they get pitched so much, and especially with like an Amazon seller, like truthfully, like especially, I can say this, like we were guilty of this, especially for the first few years. We were selling so many Me Too products that like a buyer's not super excited about it, right? Like, and so you have to figure out like which retailers are going to be the best partner for you. Like, we for instance, we don't sell into Walmart stores. We sell on Walmart.com, but like, going to Walmart.com, we don't really add a ton of value that their buyer can't go and like buy, like, go source that specific product. And so it's just kind of like figuring out like, okay, well, TJ Maxx, for instance, will or only order. They don't like really source themselves unless it's a very specific category, but they're trying to buy inventory that's already in the US. So like for us, they're a better partner. And so it's figuring out like, okay, which retailers are better partners because we have inventory in the US. We have the right, products that are like trending with the right like buyers. And then basically figuring out a way to get the introduction to the right decision maker, and then just meeting with them frequently. I think that's like the big thing where we like probably like 8x our retail sales in 1 year was just because we set up like a quarterly meeting and we would just come up with a list of like 40 products. Our head of retail would basically put a list of like 40 products, be like, and it would just be like a slideshow. We're just going through, they'd give us feedback, review samples, and it was just a much more collaborative process, very similar to how you would work with a manufacturer. We do the same thing with a lot of our brick and mortar retailers.
Yeah. Now, I actually didn't get a chance to ask you guys this earlier, but how important is it when you're doing a private label or a brand, okay, to build that sort of the landing page for like the company page, the more information about it, right? Like, cause somebody will go into a store or they get on Amazon, they see a product or they see a brand, they might go Google search it, especially if they get it from a store, right? Like they want to find out more about the company or maybe what other products they sell. I'm assuming you guys are doing something like that you're also building, the whole thing behind it that, hey, you can go to our website, there's support contacts, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I just want to make sure I fully understand your question. So you're saying like, how important is it having like some kind of online presence off of Amazon for retail brands specifically?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So look, I think it depends on the retailer that you're working with, right? I mean, if you're working with, let's say like a TJ Maxx, maybe it doesn't matter as much. I think ultimately you just need to know your target demo, like what's important for them. If they're looking for value, probably not as important. I mean, I would still put up a website there. But if you're a really premium option, then it definitely matters more. So, and I think it's really important to just understand, like, for your customer, are they going down the path of what I call branded or unbranded experience? Meaning, are they actually going to look at a product and do research? Does the product justify that? And if that's the case, that would be what I call branded experience, where they're specifically typing in, let's say I just discovered, I don't know, let's say I discovered Blistex, right? Like this is a brand. I'm going to go ahead and look and try to find more about it because, I want to know more about this particular product. But if I'm selling, I don't know, like let's say just food containers and it's a really value-based item, I might not care as much. And so, it's just important, I think, to answer that, it just matters on what you think your customer is going to do, not necessarily what channel you're going through. Yeah.
And kind of a follow-up to that. So I'm not talking necessarily, I mean, not that you can't do it where you sell from your own website, but it was kind of more like, you brought up the container thing. Maybe I really love this container, had a unique lid or a unique feature. I might want to go look at your website because maybe now you guys also have other kitchen items, right? And I might be like, oh, well, what else is unique? Oh, look at, they made this really cool, unique cutting board. I don't know how unique you can get with a cutting board, right? But or, hey, look at this garlic press. No, don't sell garlic press. No, but you know what I mean, right? It's just more like being able to go and kind of find out about the brand, especially if you see that brand up there and it's got a lot of reviews. You might want to know a little more about the company or what other items they're selling or where can I buy it from. That's kind of what I was getting at. And that, I feel like, when sellers get to a certain level with a product or a brand, you kind of need to have something there to kind of just, kind of a little bit of social proof, right? Like, hey, we're a real company. We're not just selling on Amazon. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, we've kind of gone a whole nother level. We're in retail. We're here. We're there. So that's where I was kind of going with it. But, okay, not to get too much off topic here. We got lots more to cover, and we got a short amount of time to do this. So, why don't we also talk about how brands have built up usually an email list, and that's another way, right? They go to the website, maybe they want to hear more about your company. When you get this email list built up, what do you guys usually suggest doing with it? What's the best way to kind of optimize that email list?
Yeah. So right now at our point, we help a lot of brands, scale and grow their presence on Amazon. And so what we find is oftentimes a lot of these brands have this misunderstanding that, oh, if I just list my product on Amazon, it's going to sell, and I think it goes back to this whole branded versus unbranded experience. Right now, 75% of all purchases on Amazon are unbranded, meaning, it's just like earbuds or chapstick or whatever it might be. And, only 25% of searches are like Nike shoes. or Apple AirPods. And so it's just important to understand that when you're a brand, that, if you're going in, there's a different approach for which kind of buyer you're going after. And so I think if you are in retail and that's actually your primary mode of distribution, or even if you DTC on your Shopify, you might have a certain percentage of people actually typing in your brand name and making that purchase. So you need a different strategy for that. And so, that might be more headline ads, it might be more this kind of thing. But if you're going after unbranded, that requires a completely different approach. That means competing with other people with maybe better value offerings from a dollar price point, or better reviews. And so it's really important as a brand to think about, if I'm not going to be able to compete on price because I need to, I need to adhere to map pricing with my retailers. I have this agreement that I'm not going to go below. I'm not going to, go lower than, my price point on my Shopify. Then I got to think about other ways that my product stands out and can compete for these unbranded search terms. And so that comes down to a lot, it being reviews, and, it being like having a source to launch your products effectively. And, oftentimes when we work with these brands, they might have a list of 20, 30,000 active subscribers in their email, but they're not necessarily leveraging it for their sales on Amazon. And so what we do is we actually, work with these guys and a lot of, brands who are listening. It's important to think about how do you leverage that list. And, a really easy way is actually to integrate your ManyChat or create a ManyChat funnel and then create an audience list of really, really engage audience members. I would say that they're fanatical people about your product and your brand, and leverage them to actually drive sales and drive reviews to your listings on Amazon so that you can really stand out from the other offerings that are more competitive on price, but don't have that brand resonance. And it's a way to use your assets and leverage those assets on another channel that you might not be familiar with. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. And then why don't you talk a little bit, both of you guys, talk about MarketplaceOps that you guys are now offering, and you've been offering for a little over a year, I think you said. Tell everybody kind of what's that service, what does it do, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So, I think, Fernando and I, we started back in 2014. And I think, we started off as sellers first. So it really gives us a different perspective of how to sell on the platform. What we notice is that a lot of agencies out there, they either come from Amazon, and I think all sellers will tell you that people who come from Amazon probably know the least about Amazon, generally, same for Facebook. And so really it's actually sellers who know how things work. And for that reason, we thought there was an opportunity for us to, actually leverage the skills and the knowledge that we had built, and also the amazing team that we had, and, help brands grow. And so, this kind of came because, we realized that as we grew our e-commerce business, it just required more and more cash. And we found that, working with clients allowed us to really leverage our skill sets without having to worry about scaling up using cash. And so that's kind of how it came about. And yeah, we've had a lot of success just really working with CPG brands, applying our knowledge and essentially acting as a turnkey solution for their products on Amazon. Because oftentimes, these brands will say, look, I do well in Shopify, I do well in retail, but honestly, Amazon is just taking up so much time. And you and I both know that keeping up, with Amazon is time and a half. So, a lot of times they don't have this expertise to handle internally, and they just want to be hands off so they can focus on what's most important, which I would say is product development and your own channel. So that's where we come in. We take over, and we essentially act as a strategic partner to help them find out how they can leverage their own assets, but also leverage our skill sets to maximize their results on Amazon and Walmart as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get you guys back on because we could go another hour for sure. But so anyways, marketplaceops.com and pixelfy.me. And I've got Fernando Cruz and Nick Young on, and we're going to get them back on. But hey, thanks guys for being on the EcomWhiz podcast. I really appreciate it.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more information, please visit feedbackwhiz.com.